Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Interstate Guns channel. Thank you for joining us again. As always, if you like this kind of content, please like, comment, and subscribe. It definitely helps us out a lot. My name's Dylan, and I'm Stefan. And today we're going to talk about some stuff that's a little bit different than what our normal videos are. So generally, we typically do a lot of like either product overviews or reviews, something like that. But today we're actually going to go over some very basic AR malfunctions. Can't really cover everything because that would be a very long video. There's a lot of different things that can happen, but we're going to talk about 4 of the most common ones that you typically are going to see. Now, this obviously is going to help you, number one, get used to being able to clear those malfunctions, but also is going to help you diagnose maybe if your gun's having a problem or something like that. A lot of times we get some people come in, maybe they're having issues with the rifle and they're like, okay, hey, like my gun's jamming whenever I go to the range. And it's kind of hard to diagnose what the issue is if that's all we know. So generally we want to know, is it double feeding? Is it failure to extract? Is it failure to feed? Things like that, because those can be different issues. And once you kind of know what the problem is or what it's actually doing, it's a lot easier to diagnose what the problem is to go from there. Now, the first one we're going to kind of go over is going to be a failure to feed. It's kind of the most basic one. There's a couple different versions, but generally, if you have your rifle, and as you can see, the rifle is unloaded, clear. So say if you're actually going to shoot and you actually bring it up and you press the trigger, fire around, press it again, click, nothing happens. Cant the gun to the side, you see the bolts all the way forward. Generally, a lot of times what that's going to be is either, number one, maybe you just had a light primer strike, could be just bad ammo, or it could just be another thing is that the bolt didn't pick up that next round of the magazine. Now with both of those, really the way, I don't have a magazine in the gun currently, but the easiest way to do it is going to be immediate action. Tap, rack, bang, what most people hear all the time. You're just going to tap the magazine and make sure it's fully seated in the gun, rack the bolt, and then just go from there. If that doesn't clear it, then you need to actually take the mag out, pull the bolt to the rear and see what's going on inside, but usually that's going to clear up that issue pretty easily. If the bolt doesn't pick up that next round, generally that means your gun's probably undergassed. Either you're running a really heavy buffer in there, or maybe your gas block's not aligned correctly, something like that, or maybe there is some type of blockage that's actually causing it to get less gas. But generally that means the gun's not getting enough gas for the bolt to go all the way to the rear to pick up that next round and actually push it into the chamber.
Set.
Right. Some other issues it could be is if you're trying to over optimize for one system, like with my setup, I'm running a very short barrel in comparison to gas length. I'm running a 11.5 with a mid-length gas system, which is over the bleeding edge of reliability, but I don't fire this system without a suppressor, so I'm reliant on this gas pressure from a suppressor to successfully cycle the weapon system. Without the suppressor, it turns into a really dope bolt action where I'll consistently eject a spent casing, but I will never feed around because I don't have enough gas in the system. Throw the suppressor on, I'm running back to proper gassing, and I'm back in business. But the next most common problem we find is a failure to eject.
Okay, I've got a massive failure to eject.
Cool, everything looks dandy. Back into fight out. This is where either you are severely over dirty in the system, or you have a broken or worn out extractor, ejector on your bolt carrier group. Replacing these is usually less than $20 to replace an extractor and a plunger system for an AR-15 bolt. Haven't really found any that are super poorly made. You can always Gucci it out. It's never a bad reason to do that, get quality parts. But typically extractors will outlast bolts on shorter barrel systems like these guys.
Now, generally with those failure to feeds or a stovepipe issue, which stovepipe, I don't have any spent casings or any dummy rounds to kind of show you. But if the bolt is mostly all the way to the front, but then you have like a spent casing sticking out right there, typically immediate action, just like the failure to feed, is going to be your best case. Just hit the magazine, rack it, and you can kind of go from there.
But going from the other side of the spectrum where we've been talking about an undergas system, another typical issue from a severely overgassed system is what's called a double feed, where your bolt is moving faster than what the brass is capable of withstanding the force of. It'll not pick up a spent casing, it'll stay stuck in your chamber, it'll pick up the next round, and you'll have a malfunction called a double feed. And the only way to clear that would be eject the magazine, lock the bolt to the rear, get the malfunction out of the way, drop the bolt, see if you can't pick up a spent casing. Sometimes you may be stuck in the position where that casing's net or rim has been just completely marred up and it can't do anything about it. You need to get a ramrod to push that spent casing out of your chamber.
Yeah, a lot of times, like he was saying, really you can just take the magazine out. You can then lock your bolt to the rear. And then once you get the magazine out, you can usually reach up in through the magazine well or reach in through the ejection port and kind of finger until you get that spent casing out of there. You want to make sure that it is locked to the rear, because otherwise that bolt's going to come forward some force and it's going to pinch your finger pretty good. It's not very fun.
You heard of Grand Thumb? Welcome to Eugene Thumb.
Yeah, exactly.
But the next most, or actually the least common failure we've seen, and like you were saying earlier before the scene, is a malfunction called a bolt override, where you get a spent casing that somehow doesn't eject normally and it stays in the upward portion of your upper receiver. The bolt comes forward and jams that casing between your gas tube and your gas tee inside the upper receiver, where you can pull your charging handle all day long and they're just riding along together. They're now locked together. It's not a very common malfunction, but when it does happen, you really need to know what to look for, because it is a much more difficult malfunction to clear.
Where a round will have a failure to eject, but it'll get
So on a DI gun, wouldn't you know that that hole's the same size as your gas tube?
That way.
And this,
so now my charging handle is pulling back this, so I can.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do by just running the action, so you have to lock your bolt to the rear. Cool, I'm ready to shoot. It's not very often it happens, but it's good to train for what does that look like, because your charging handle is between that casing and the bolt. Nothing happens.
Yeah, because with that one, you can sit there and try and do your immediate action over and over again, and it's not really going to fix much. Generally, a lot of times what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to lock that bolt to the rear if you can, try to rip that magazine out. Once you can, if you can get the charging handle to actually move back and forth, a lot of times what most people try to do is you're going to try to be able to pull the charging handle back while doing that if it is kind of stuck, and actually do what's called mortaring, where you actually hit the stock onto something hard, either the ground or anything else around you like that, while trying to pull the charging handle to the rear. It'll kind of rip that charging handle back and pull that round out. If you can't, the other thing to do again is to try to lock the bolt to the rear if it is moving, and then try to reach up in there and actually try to get the spent casing out itself. Like Stefan was saying, it's not super common. I've never had one organically happen to me before. I've seen it only maybe twice. I've done a couple like made it happen, like an induced malfunction, just to practice those types of drills. Take a spent casing and actually put it up in there, and then try to run the bolt and actually try to work the gun, and then have to force myself to actually pull it out. But it is one of those, if you haven't had it happen before, you haven't seen it, and all of a sudden you look down and you're just like, what is going on? It can be confusing. It can be pretty annoying to get rid of. And a lot of those, just the same thing with the double feed. It can definitely be caused with overgassing. And when we say overgassing, generally that's going to happen when you have a suppressor. Sometimes you can get an AR-15 off the shelf, and each manufacturer is going to be different, but there are some companies that typically overgas their guns from the factory, and they do that because of the fact that they want you to be able to cycle any kind of ammo you put in there, whether you're putting good quality ammo that's going to be gassed appropriately, but sometimes you can get some of that cheap ammo that whenever you put it in there, it might be a little on the under gas side, so they want to turn up that gas that's going back there and make sure that it's going to cycle. And it works really good, but then the problem is if you put a traditional baffle stack suppressor on there, some of those can be very gassy, and now you're increasing even more gas into the gun to the point where you can cause those double feeds, you can get a bolt override, something like that, and it's not the most fun. But at least once you see that, you can kind of start to diagnose, okay, if it's happens once, rarely ever, probably not a problem. If it starts happening more common though, maybe you need to start looking at some gassing issues, maybe adjustable gas block, something along those lines.
Swapping out some buffers can help as well.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest and cheapest option, honestly, is just,
Right.
maybe going with a heavier or a lighter buffer, depending on what you had and what your malfunctions are.
And you can tell what type of ejection pattern you're having based off of what type of gassing you're having. So typically, if you were seeing a more forward north of 3 o'clock, what I mean by 3 o'clock is if your rifle is your barrel is the 12 o'clock position, straight out at a 90-degree angle from the ejection port is called 3 o'clock. That is the more optimal gassing, where it's not undergassed, just not overgassed. It's right in that Goldilocks zone. If you're undergassed, you'll have a more rearward ejection, kind of like the 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. If you're severely overgassed, you'll be in that 2:30 to 1 o'clock position. And running a suppressor on that is definitely going to increase the gas. So if you have a normally gassed weapon without a suppressor at that 3 o'clock ejection, expect your weapon system to be overgassed. You can tune, like for my carbine here, I've tuned it for a more appropriately gas system with the suppressor, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Firing this thing without a suppressor, I can feel my sinuses every time. It's not a comfortable gun to shoot, especially indoors. So I try to hush it up as much as possible. But if you're looking for something where you're going to go back and forth, swapping out to a adjustable gas system as well as swapping out your buffers is the easiest and cheapest way to do it. They do have adjustable bolt carriers, but there's only a few on the market that are actually reliable.
The only one I really know is maybe the bootleg.
Yeah, and that's a 4-position adjustable bolt carrier group. And I don't have any experience with it. I can't really speak on for long-term reliability, but for most DI guns, an adjustable gas system, there are a dozen companies that make good quality ones. You've got some from Odinworks, you've got some from Faxon, you've got some from Superlative, who also makes the piston kitten in my carbine. I actually really like the way your Faxon does it, where it's moving the gas tube.
Yeah,
I think that's
super
pretty
interesting. Yeah, to adjust it. Another option, if you don't want to go with something adjustable, you just want to fix it. You're like, okay, I'm just putting this setup on there and I'm leaving it as is. Another option I've seen is Black River Tactical. They make what they call the BRT Easy tube. It's basically a custom gas tube. You go on their website and you can spec out exactly what your gun is, what length barrel you have, length of the gas length, what kind of ammo you're shooting, suppressor, your buffer, all that kind of stuff. And then they'll basically figure out exactly what size gas port you need actually inside the gas tube. And then you can actually spec it out that way. I haven't put any of those on any of my guns. I haven't really needed to, but I know quite a few people that have bought those that have had really good results out of those to really clean up if they have something that's severely overgassed or even undergassed.
Yeah, so the biggest reason for us doing this video is to discuss, we don't have safe queens. We're having these duty-purposed rifles to actually get out there and get familiar with our weapon systems, because if we don't know what a gun's going to do in worst-case scenario, like something as simple as being undergassed or overgassed, or even something as simple as having a failure of a magazine, we don't know until we get out there and actually train. But one of my favorite things to do at the range is a drill I call the stick of failure, where you're at the flat range and you find a stick and you have your buddy stick it in your ejection port to purposefully cause a malfunction, whether that malfunction is a stovepipe failure to eject, double feed, bolt override.
All right, he's running away. Great.
Or sometimes you fire 3-4 rounds and you're just
Literally
waiting for your buddy
flying
to come on, stick the stick in a little deeper. It's a great way to practice at the flat range, because inducing malfunction takes you longer than it does to shoot. It saves you time for, real world application of fixing a problem and getting back into shooting without you draining your wallet, just mag dumping into trash.
Yeah, so you can go out and, we always recommend people going out and doing classes. There's plenty of it depends on where you are. There's plenty of classes around, plenty of companies doing that type of stuff. Around here in Hammond, we have out in Robert pretty close to us, we have Advantage Group Training that does a lot of classes out there. I've done quite a few of those at this point. And there's a lot of things I picked up going to those classes and really putting through the hard use on all the weapons that we bring out there. That there's some little things that you pick up out there that maybe you don't pick up normally going to just a normal flat range and just doing your regular drills. And especially going out there and having like somebody that's doing really good training that can actually have a second pair of eyes on you and kind of showing you if you're doing something wrong, or maybe if you do have a malfunction, maybe you think it's one thing, but they see something else. That definitely helps out a lot, and you get to see a lot more that way.
Right, and depending on where you are, close to us, if you're more towards the Baton Rouge side of things, in FRC, that's where Orion Training Group has made their home base. If you're more towards the Mississippi side, you've got Mike and the guys over with MCTA. everybody who we've mentioned is top-notch guys. They all do great classes, but they focus on different aspects.
Absolutely. If this is something that you like, guys, or if you got any other ideas on things that you want to see, or you got any questions, please leave them in the comments. Let us know. We'll try to pick up on that and try to get you some more videos on stuff that you're looking for. Thanks again for joining us, guys. Stefan, I think you got some other info on something we got coming up?
Coming up on this Saturday, January 18th at 8:30, we're having our Silencer Saturday, where we're going to be providing a light breakfast and some coffee. So that way we can just go over how to get into a suppressor, because it's, for this longest time, it has been this foreign, weird, forbidden object. Or for the longest time, people thought that you just couldn't own one, and that's never been.
People now too.
Yeah, we've had them come into the shop this week, but it's not something that's super complicated. We have found a lot of the pitfalls, especially partnering with somebody like Silencer Shop with their kiosk, where we can get all the necessary information from you. We can get your photos, we can get your fingerprints, and we can go over the pros and cons of whether you want to file as an individual, as a trust, as well as all the different types of suppressors out there, because there is no perfect suppressor. Because the perfect suppressor is short, it's light, it's quiet, no flash, and it's inexpensive. It's not real. You can try, but you're going to compromise on something. There's a give and take with everything. So we're just going to go over the pros and cons of getting a trust and filing as an individual, and the different types of suppressors available on the market, and what's going to best suit your needs for your suppressor application.
Yeah, so again, if that's something that you're interested in, if you got questions about suppressors, I mean, you can come down and see us anytime. But if you really want to sit down and have an in-depth discussion with us, come down and come see us on that Saturday in the morning. We're going to start at 8:30, like you said, and we're going to get that rolling, guys. Thanks again for joining us, guys, here at Interstate Guns. Have a great day.
Get out there, touch some grass, send some brass.